Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Dave. Today I'm going to restore this Delta Milwaukee 14-inch wood and metal cutting bandsaw from the 1950s. You're watching Parts and Restoration. Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Dave from Parts and Restoration. Thanks for tuning into another voiceover commentary video of a restoration that I worked on. This video is geared toward the person who's working on the Delta Milwaukee saw, and hopefully it will give you some insights on how to do your own. There will be some restoration tips throughout and just the story of this job. It's a little long, so bear with me. So this saw is very old, 1953 vintage. I found this in the barn workshop of a gentleman who restored old cars. It was sitting right alongside a Ford Model A. Additionally, from this haul of tools, I got a Wilton bullet vise, some gigantic wrenches, some really cool old stuff. And this saw is just the coolest thing in that whole shop. I'm so glad that I brought it home. Delta Milwaukee 14-inch wood and metal cutting bandsaw. And here we go. These wheel guards come off super easy with their thumb screws. And we're just going to start picking this thing apart. That there is the upper blade guide assembly. And we're just going to unscrew everything and get it off of the machine. You'll notice this whole thing is just totally corroded. You see that like white, flaky, kind of powdery corrosion. Also, a lot of moisture got between the paint and the castings and forgings on this machine. And the paint was peeling and bubbling away in a lot of different places. Probably lead-based paint. I did try and take precautions with that as I used paint stripper as opposed to just grinding all this paint off with like a wire cup, which I often do. This is the blade tensioning assembly that we're taking off. Couple springs. That part was painted without primer. As you can see, all the flaky paint happening on there. Just nasty. Like, whoever did it just did not do a fantastic job, and they probably did it a really long time ago too, so that's got a factor. That gigantic wrench that I'm holding came from this gentleman. Look how corroded on there this wheel is. I really just had to loosen up. Look all the dust coming off that thing when I bang on it. It was just, everything is just frozen in place. Now, I really didn't want to break this wheel when I knocked it off, so I wound up tying it to a rafter in my shop. And I'm going to bang it off with a piece of wood just to get it free. And that way it won't hit the floor. There she goes dangling. Those things are like 200 bucks on eBay. They're freaking jerks. And that is going to be left unpainted. I'll be sandblasting this here shortly, and I wound up buffing it out. Those pink cups are awesome. I stole those from the hospital when my second son was born, and I used them to organize my screws for each one of the main components, so I didn't get them mixed up. Worked out really well. This whole assembly is the lower blade guide assembly. And it also controls a bearing that bears against the blade when you're cutting. Allows that to move in and out with control of thumb screws. Although, as it wasn't moving anything. I had to break those things free with all the rust on there. Look at all that rusty powder coming off of that. Look at all that flaky corrosion on that thumb screw, too. It was cool when Jimmy and Eric rebuilt their bandsaw, Jimmy DeResta and Eric from Hand Tool Rescue. He actually wound up replacing one of those with a faucet knob from the 50s. It was they look exactly the same. It's the exact same part, just about. And as you can see, this thing was so tight on there that I had to bang it with a punch to get it moving. Everything was just frozen in corrosion, like I say. It just nothing moved right. That bearing is completely locked up. Maybe getting like a tiny little bit of play just to get it moving. Let's just take that whole lower assembly off. Also stuck. A little bit of hammer time, a little persuasion. Not a big deal. I need a bigger wrench.
And if you have a big wrench, why not use it?
Could have sufficed with a smaller wrench, but why not? I got a big old grill. May as well use her. I was just so impressed overall with the quality of this machine. Everything is so well made. Even these studs, they're just well machined parts, and you just don't see it anymore.
Nope. Nope. You motherfucker. Okay. Have it your way. Oh yeah. I think this thing is pinned in a couple spots. Let's see. Yep. Aha. Victory. Yeah! That was not the fight I was expecting. Cool. Oh, penetrating oil. How I love thee.
Now we'll take off this this nicely stamped belt guard. Another nice piece of American quality manufacture. The stampings on this thing are just perfect. Obviously it's ugly as shit right now, but it'll be nice when it's done. This spacer goes behind the belt guard. Don't forget. Nice little knurled thumb knobs, those cleaned up well. Look how greasy and oily this thing is. Just disgusting. Filthy. And I get to work through all that here shortly, you'll see. So now I'm removing the slow speed gearbox. This is just a geared speed reduction. And it used a million little screws to hold it in place. In between sealing the oil in is a fiber gasket, which I replaced. That was long gone. It wound up breaking when I opened the box up. But I had to use my largest pry bar to get that thing off.
Okay, we've got our slow speed gearbox for cutting metal.
Okay, so now we're going to knock out a shaft that should be careful not to be knocked across the room. Oh wait, whoops.
That was easy.
4 bolts held the upper body casting onto the lower base castings. Easy work, came right off. Now look at this. So much oil. This almost looks organic. I thought this looked like a jungle when I was looking at it. Look, it's like almost mossy. All the disgusting oil-soaked chips and sawdust. This is cool. This is Gitz Brothers manufacturing oil cup there. It is brass with some kind of a nickel plate on it. And here is our sawdust chute, our chip chute. Does seem to work pretty well, catching all that oil, and you can see all the old sawdust in there that it caught over the years. Nasty. Has a lot of work to clean. And then we're just breaking the motor base off of those side castings, and getting everything separated out so we can start cleaning. Look at all that nastiness. Gotta love it. Check out the size of that old Century motor. Old 3/4 horse propulsion induction motor. I mean, the thing's a Cadillac. It's got bronze bearings inside. It's just heavy as can be. It'll run forever. The motor guys had no idea how to fix it. I took it to a modern motor repair shop, and they totally confused. So I'm working on it on my own. Doing a lot of YouTube video research, talking to some experts on Instagram. By the way, if you're not following me on Instagram already, check out @Parts and Restoration. Do some cool stuff on there. And I replaced the motor with a 1 horsepower Westinghouse. It's almost exactly the same of the rated RPMs on there. And let you enjoy this sandblasting. Okay, back to the work. Horizontal wire wheel. Got this from Eric at Hand Tool Rescue. That's how he has his set up. It works fantastic. Best thing you can do if you restore stuff. It's so much more clearance to work than using a bench grinder with a wire wheel. Angle grinder with a wire wheel still has its place for big stuff. Definitely going to use that, but for small parts, that's the way to go. Okay, purple power. Got this from AutoZone. Do not like it. Maybe it's just me. I had it pretty well diluted, but it didn't really seem to do much. I used it on some small parts. It worked okay for degreasing, but my go-to, crud cutter. It's perfect. It did a great job. Once I sprayed some crud cutter on some of that nasty stuff, came right up. It is my go-to product. It works fantastic. I'm sure there are others that are just as well, but that's what I like. Now, to get this real thick, nasty, like Nutella grease up off the machine, I wound up using scrapers. Both plastic and metal, and lots of metal wire brushes, some picks to get into the nooks and crannies, but mostly the scraper was my way to go. I have this nice, really stiff bristled plastic brush that got up some of these pieces here. Ugh, yeah, look at that. And look at that gross Onan green. It's like an old generator paint color from the 70s, just gross. Jasco paint remover. Works like a charm, extremely nasty stuff. Caustic, do not let it get on your skin. I got it all over my arms. I actually did not get it on my feet at all, despite wearing flip-flops for all you haters. But yeah, that stuff hurts. It burns instantly. There's no questioning whether you got Jasco on your arms or your hands. It happened. So wear gloves, wear goggles, wear closed-toed shoes. Don't be an idiot like me. Protect yourself. This stuff is nasty. But it works great. Look at that. Oh my gosh. Pulled off a couple layers of paint off of that joker. And then I wound up cleaning off the Jasco with denatured alcohol. They recommend denatured alcohol. Also, I think I use paint thinner. I use odorless mineral spirits to get that up as well. Acetone would work. Any of those, just to clear that nasty, greasy stuff. Or it's like a gel to get it off your part. Here we go. 2 layers of that stuff coming right up. There's the original gray paint, which I tried to somewhat closely match, but I wound up going a little bit lighter. Yeah, nasty stuff. Gloves. Butyl gloves is really the way to go. This stuff will eat through your regular hospital rubber gloves. And now we're just degreasing, final degreasing on the castings. I wanted to get as much as I could up with acetone before I did paint. So that's just paint prep. All right, so we're doing a little masking. I'm masking that bearing surface for where the gasket will sit. Don't want any paint there. Trying out a new technique that somebody showed me, using a ball peen hammer to actually cut the mask so that edge has a nice little sharp corner on it. Tap gently on the edge with the ball peen hammer, and look, makes a perfect mask every time. Utilize the same technique for gasket forming when I put my fiber gasket in place later on. Worked like a charm. You'll see. Rust-Oleum makes good paint products, obviously, but I wound up using their self-etching primer. That is the recommended priming substance for bare metal. The self-etching does I believe it's like a galvanizing action. It winds up kind of eating its way into the metal and gives you something to stick. It kind of makes the paint stick better. That's what primer does, obviously, but that's what the self-etch does. I actually kind of like this. Oh, it's like almost like an olive drab green. It's kind of very military. I might use that on something in the future. I don't know. In actual paint, not in primer. So getting our belt guards, or our wheel guards, pardon me, primed up, hanging them from the ceiling of my shop. Got a nice cross draft coming across here because I am in the basement and I try and always use respiratory protection when I'm painting. Stuff's too nasty. Your lungs are fragile. You got to take good care of them. Very robust table casting. Very impressed with this one. I mean, super heavy. The weights are actually cast right onto all of these things, I guess maybe for shipping purposes. Probably pretty smart. Rust-Oleum Coastal Gray is what I went with. It's a decent match for the just a good all-around machine gray color. I'm very pleased with it so far. And it wouldn't be my shop if stuff wasn't falling over and nearly being broken. Not shown in this video is 3 to 4 coats of satin clear coat. Also Rust-Oleum, just for the compatibility, and it's relatively cheap. Just to seal in the flavor. I don't want, you know, the paint job to get all scratched up. I mean, it will, but, you know, protect it while I can with some clear coat. So much painting. And there's my milling machine right there, as you can see. Little movie magic to clean the shop, and boom. It was like 4-hour clean job right there. Ugh. My shop gets so gross. I know I'm not the only one. So this is an aftermarket job, I believe. I think the owner did this to the saw, putting those angle iron pieces to connect between those mounting screws, those mounting tabs, I guess. Give it a little bit of structural rigidity. Pretty smart, I think. You can tell it's not original because it's just like it looked like a bad stick weld job on there. But pretty smart. I like that. I think it worked out pretty well. And we're using nuts and lock washers on those just to keep everything nice and tight. And here are 4 thumb screws that are nicely knurled. Straight knurl job on these from the factory. I needed 4 additional ones. eBay wanted $50 for 2. I'm like, no. So, wound up making some. You don't see me make them in the video, but you see me install them. Here comes that Sawdust Chute. Real nice feature to get it out of the, keep all the sawdust and chips out of that lower casting. And here we go, a little fibrous gasket material. And we're using that same technique to get the nice outline. I struggled to keep this thing right in place without moving, but just taking your time and making sure that it stays right where it needs to be while you continue to tap will make sure it's the right size. Marking that hole where the screw would pass through and knocking it out with a leather punch. I think I went a little big on the holes, but I've got 1.5 quart of oil in that there reservoir, and it hasn't leaked yet, so I guess I did it okay. Hillbilly style, knocking these new bearings in place. I got new bearings from a local distributor in Fishtown in Philadelphia. Unfortunately, they're going to be leaving to New Jersey or overseas or something like that, but nice old school business, and we're knocking these bearings in redneck style with a piece of wood. I don't have a proper press, so I use wood. And there goes the gasket in place and a million little freaking screws to get tightened into place. You want to go nice and tight on these so you have a good seal so you don't get leaks. And there we go, the lower casting back onto the base. There we go, Gitz Brothers Manufacturing again. Nice oil cup, brass brass with nickel plate. Beautiful. And here we go, the upper arm going onto the lower casting of the saw. It was a lot easier getting it on this time, or working with that bolt this time, being nice and clean, freshly wire wheeled, and tightening it up was obviously much easier. The support structure for the table. And look at those nice studs. I'm not talking about me. Let's knock that wheel into place, nice and clean out of the sandblaster. With got knocked with glass beads, and we'll just reinstall some more components of the table. That's the adjustable side. I actually had to do this a few times because I screwed up which side was which. The other one of these half circle shaped adjustment thingies was does not have the scale on it, so I wound up doing it the wrong way the first time. This is the lower blade guide assembly. It's got that bearing, and we're going to install that and get that back on the saw. Now I got these new, they're called cool blocks. So they're blocks, usually on bandsaws you have these, they're called blocks, finger quotes you can't see, that bear up against the blade, or just barely bear against the blade. Gives it a guide and keeps it from deflecting too much when you cut. These ones are made of like almost like a fabric material. They're fibrous. They're impregnated with what do you call it? With graphite. Keeps the blade lubricated, so they say, as you're working with it. And nice 2 big screws to reassemble this onto the machine. Yeah, check out those fiber blocks. You can really see the pattern on them. They're almost like that that scale they use for making knife handles. That's like a fibrous material. That's what it reminded me of. Taking out the backlash in that, and we'll tighten down that collar. Beautiful. Turns nice and free. Remember how it was before, all rusty and disgusting. Check out the knurling on those thumb screws. Just beautiful American machinery. A nice, like a craftsman made those. Gotta love that. Definitely can't get these new like this anymore. Look at that. Doesn't look like a faucet? Jimmy DeResta on his saw, when him and Eric from Hand Tool Rescue redid, they used an actual faucet as a handle. That is so cool. Alright, there's that nice table casting. Use my random orbital sander to get that cleaned up. And a little WD-40 to seal in the flavor. Pretty happy with that. Okay, that'll keep you from cutting your arm off when the saw is running. It protects the blade where it's outside of the guards. Just made of wood. I was thinking about replacing that, but it was in decent shape. I just painted over it, and it looks well. I'm proud of how it turned out. You can see I had some tape there to protect my paint job. Good tip, so you don't screw up your paint job after the whole thing's assembled. You don't have to start back over sanding and blending. It's just a total mess. Don't let it happen to you. And now we're readjusting the blade tensioner. Those knobs are pretty cool. Originally were nickel plated, but the plating was coming off, so I just sandblasted it away. And underneath of the nickel plating was some kind of a brass plating or copper plating. Pretty cool. These tires, by the way, kind of suck. They're not crowned like the original ones were. I think the original ones might have been made of like butyl rubber or something like that. These are like it's much stiffer. I'm not pleased with them at all. They're not the right thickness. Yeah, and they have no crown at all. They just don't. The blade doesn't track as well as it would have on the older ones. So, word of the wise, not pleased. Keep your old ones if you can. I didn't cut mine off. I actually may reinstall them. And these were only like it was like $30 for those tires too, which is kind of expensive, but whatever. Giant wrench getting the job done, and yeah, check out the spin on this thing. Perfect. Would spin like that all day. Okay, so now we're gonna reinstall or reassemble the upper blade guide, and nice stampings as you would expect from a nicely made American machine. That is the holder for the blade blocks, and that's the holder for the bearing. So let's start reinstalling these. New bearing. It's actually, now that it's on, it's kind of giving me a hard time. I'm not sure if that washer was supposed to be there, but if the darn thing doesn't spin properly, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna have to tune this whole saw up, even now that it's been reassembled. It needs a little bit. There's some good YouTube guides on how to tune a bandsaw. Definitely recommend checking them out. If you have a bandsaw or you wind up getting one, a good tune-up job makes a huge difference. I tuned up an old 12-inch Craftsman that I actually sold a day before I bought this saw for the new owner, and it made a ton of difference. Very, very impressed. I almost didn't want to give it away. It was great. Okay, so this is an original bandsaw blade that came with the saw. This uses, I think, between a 94 and a 96-inch blade. I was almost bought one at Harbor Freight, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna buy some online. I'll get myself a proper one. Here go those wheel guards coming back on. That is that classic line of the saw, just so iconic if you're into old tools. Really is beautiful, and they were in great shape, really not that beat up. Once it cleaned up with a new paint job, cleaned everything, sanded everything off, it was just stunning. And check out that stamp, that logo, beautiful. Wound up using a heat gun to get a lot of that latex paint off, and now I'm actually just sort of antiquing these rivet heads. I wanted the whole machine to look new, but I want it to look restored too, and I want these to look like originally restored rivets. Just a little too shiny. And check out that logo. Beautiful. 2 icons. Just kidding. I'm just a YouTube nerd. Delta Equipment Company in Philadelphia. So cool. I have another machine with this same retailer's logo on it. I just love that. And it cleaned up really nice as well. And this indicates that it's from the Tupelo, Mississippi plant in 1953. Too cool. Gotta love the history. Alright, we're taking the masks off of the slow speed gearbox. And there's the handle with that knob sticking up. I'm using a Harbor Freight buffer with some rouge to clean all the rust and nastiness off there. And I got really excited, as you can see here. Oh yeah. Really get it. You gotta love your tools, you know? Yeah. Shop air is great. It's nice to have a little sprayer like that. Oh, that's one way to open up a box. And what do we have here? An original bandsaw fence. Got this on eBay. Was kind of expensive, but I really wanted to have it. I plan on doing some resawing on this here bandsaw. And a little This Old Tony style cut. Oh yeah, popcorn's done. Smells good. Check out that. All I did was strip it down with the Sandblaster, primed and painted, and buffed the shiny metal surfaces. Didn't feel like showing that on camera. But now we're just installing the fence. Easy peasy. The rail on the end there has a rack gear on it. And there's a pinion gear on the front of that of the fence, that little silver knob there that I'm touching now. And just tracks back and forth on that. It's got a lock in the front and a lock in the back. Lock it down nice and secure. There's my 1 horsepower Westinghouse. That black plate on the back I actually had to fabricate. It was a used motor. It did not come with that. Nice, easy job. Used some masking tape to get the pattern down like I saw in Duresta, and made it out just fine. Now these are my thumb screws. I machined and knurled these on the lathe. And now we're putting our stamped belt guard back in place. Looks so much better with all that ugly green paint off of it. Nice and clean, just fresh, just feels good, looks good. Really, really pleased with this machine. Okay, so pulleys are going back on. Just using some wood to protect the aluminum. And as before, these came on easy. That's just as easy as they came off. A couple of grub screws locked them in place. Easy peasy. Now, this didn't fit right because the old motor that it was mounted on had a larger shaft than the one that my motor has now. So I'm making a bronze bushing to fill up that space. Just turning that on the lathe. And get that OD perfect, and it's good. And now we're going to get the ID reamed out real quick. So we're just stepping up from that centering bit to larger and larger drill bits, and then I got a reamer that's the right size of the shaft on my new motor. So we're going to ream that out, and then just part it off, and then she'll go into the milling machine to get a keyway pass-through cut. That's a nice little keyway, a place for my key to go pass through from the original shaft.
Oh,
nice
yeah.
and tight fit, just what you want. Beautiful thing. It's nice to have machine tools. Okay, so that's AccuLink belt from Harbor Freight. The more expensive, potentially American-made ones from Granger were like $50 for 5 feet. That was $30 for 5 feet. And yeah, we're done. All finished up. Nice and clean, everything's shining. It's just such a beautiful machine, and with it's got that kind of more rare Art Deco base. I tried to keep everything that I could. That's an original switch box, original metal conduit, and I cleaned up all of these labels as best I could. Just really, really beautiful. You got to admire that in the craftsmanship of these old machines. They're they're very ornate in their own sense. They're very artistic in the way they were designed. That, of course, form follows function, but they're beautiful as well. So let's plug it in and get it running. Get some high viscosity gear oil in there. My gasket's held as pleased, and power. Contact. She's running. So first things first, we're going to turn her off and set her into metal cutting. And I have, this is a old belt buckle from my job that was broken, and I'm going to try and turn that logo in the middle there into some kind of a stamp. So I'm cutting all the excess away. Words and letters that would be backwards on the stamp are getting cut away. I think this is pewter. It might be aluminum. I want to say it's pewter. But that's a soft metal, so this isn't really showing off the capacity of this machine, but it worked. It's metal. And now we're going to cut some letters. This is cutting like a knife through butter. This little soft pine plywood. Really comfortable to cut. Tracked properly. They just did a really good job. Of course, I'm getting sawdust on my feet. Check that out. Old school digraph machine, cutting those stencils out. Trying to be like some cool kid we all know with his digraph stencils. Please subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the video. Thanks for following along, and I'll see you soon. Woo! Thanks for sticking it out to the end. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and click the bell button next to that so that anytime I post a new video, you'll automatically get an alert. Also, if you aren't already, follow me on Instagram at Parts and Restoration. You can see a little bit more of my day-to-day operations in the shop, projects that I'm working on. I'm posting once or twice a day, every day. Also, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit that like button so I know I can get some feedback. Leave comments in the comments section, and be sure to share with your friends. Look forward to seeing you on the next video, and thanks for watching.